Hi everyone. In my previous video, talked a little bit about becoming a Shree, right? So what a Shree is, we're not necessarily just talking about someone who has Shree in their name. We're talking about the being of a Shree being, okay? As in, what that basically means is a storyteller within the story. So one of the main storytellers, you know and what does storyteller mean? Basically someone who's working at the level of the story, so making modifications to priorities of systems and how they move within the story, right, of creation at this level. So what do Shrees do? Well, Shrees are very interesting. Shrees, you can go to, for example, I know I bring it back to Hinduism a lot, although this is of all faiths. But in Hinduism, and different faiths have different beliefs about these things, and that's definitely great. And maybe I'll have the opportunity to talk about different ways of seeing things at later times. So, Sri, for example, if you go to a temple, let's say a Sri Lankan temple, okay, you're going to get there and you're going to see almost, sometimes in some temples, you're going to see basically like an alcove that's done for them, or an alcove, or there's an arc around them, right? Creating basically a perception of they're coming from somewhere, right? So what you're seeing basically is you're seeing the deity coming out of that arc, right? Or coming out of that alcove, or that kind of like almost like a shelf that's built around them, it could be with tiles inside or something like that, right? And at that point, what you're seeing is you're seeing basically a being, when we're talking about a Shree. The same concept applies to other beings, but a Shree, for example, a specific type of being, very unique being. It's very intense being a Shree at times, and it becomes one big story. You're just moving through that story, and you're thinking about different elements of the story and creating the story, and you're a central part in the story. You're a hub where all the story creation kind of takes place, and you're also an energy center. So it can be intense, right? You're basically an extremely developed energy center, right? Okay, so that's reached really high development level. Okay. So with that, a Shri is very unique. For example, Shri could do weird things like kind of like just turn in place. Sometimes you'll see them doing that, and basically wherever they move, they have like a link into the operating, at one level of priority of their level of priority into the operating of the system, right? So what they can do is they can work at that level. So for example, you might notice Shrees, they might meditate at long hours or something like that, and it's very interesting phenomenon. There's the whole phenomenon of their window, right? Because a Shri basically, if you look at, for example, some of the statues or murtis that you see of Shris, for example, in Sri Lankan temples or other temples, have blinds on them, right, that you can close and open, like a cloth that you can pull over and pull back. And the same concept applies when a Shri is in the physical here, doing their thing. Basically, they kind of use that same concept with their window, uh, at their place. So basically, if they have a balcony, for example, you know what might take place there, or even when they step out of a door, or sometimes they do that. When they're just doing stuff regularly, they'll push through. Right? We talked about Shri is to push through, so they'll push through, act at the level of the story, make some changes, and it's a representation. When you look at, for example, is the physical representation of when they're not in the physical, and when you're communicating with a deity or something like that, a Shri, right? At that point, you're hoping that they step out of that, basically their statue or something like that, like move forward and touch you or touch your life, right, or change something about you. So it's that same principle. So they're coming through that little alcove to you, basically. The same concept often takes place in the Shri, how they're going to be doing their practice and all that. They'll often, for example, step out of their balcony with one foot and push forward, or you'll see little odd things. Sometimes they'll play with the set of the of the drapes, basically. Basically what they'll do is, for example, they'll open the drapes on the window, right? Close them, open them partially to give messages. For example, like, okay, like I'm open right now. There's energy coming out, and there always is. But I mean, more than when the drapes are closed, And then they communicate. So they live really integrated within the story and all the different components of the story. So they're a bit odd. Okay. So yeah, there's the Shree, and then as I've discussed, that's a part of who I am, Shree Bhagwan, and it's very interesting because when you're looking at Shrees, that's one level of very evolved being. You also have, for example, Buddhas, a very high level of evolved being. You have saints, you have enlightened masters. So you have all these different paths that you can take to advance in your practice, in your journey, right? No matter what tradition or faith you hold dear, um, and yeah, exactly, and you can just basically achieve. You can set yourself goals to achieve certain things in your life, right? And to get to that goal, well, you have to start doing the work to get there, right? So once again, enlightened masters, saints, yogis that start getting more and more intense, and seeing things in different ways. You have Shrees, Buddhas, right? All these different levels that you can basically aspire to, and then you can reach in your lifetime if you practice. And Zen work can lead you to all these paths, right? There's the elements in there to get there. So as there are other keys in all the traditions of the world and all the faiths of the world, and frankly all the objects of the world, all the sounds of the world, all the sights of the world, everywhere. Okay, and then you can reflect more on that later if you want. So yeah, so that's how Shree sometimes has an odd lifetime. You'll see them doing weird things like pushing out of things, and that's it's they're unique people. They've reached very high level of development. You know, they've become enlightened. You know, they're at a high level of creation, and they can change the story very, very much. There are some elements that they can't change, okay? Like there are some elements that are very difficult for me to change as well. You can say those are fundamental elements of the story or of creation that can't be changed because they maintain the creation in one way in an essential function, right? So at that point, you have to basically, you can grant the permissions you can to the people you've learned to trust along the way. And then at that point, if there's any major modifications to make the code or something like that, I can make that somewhere along the way. All right. Thanks for listening.